My name is Susan Marinack, and I'm the chair of the Leverett Historical Commission. And this is another program in the series that we've been running since 2019, both in person and on Zoom, about Leverett's industrial heritage. And this series has been incredibly interesting for us as a commission because we've learned so much through the research that Pleun and Eva have done with other helping them, excuse me. And we're hoping to continue into this year by starting to listen to some of the people talk about their work who actually worked in some of these industries. So that's going to be sort of the second phase of this project. So stay tuned. And I'm going to turn it over to Pleun Bouricius, historian who helps us with these programs, and Eva Gibavic, who work together, and they're going to take it from here.
Thank you, Susan. Welcome. Welcome to an evening with charcoal. My name is Pleun Bouricius. I'm a public historian and historian of landscape, I guess. And I'm going to mostly not be all that visible tonight because I'm going to be giving you, narrating a slideshow. But I'm here. You can see me on the little side window. Welcome. A sense of where you are. Conversations about Leverett's historic and industrial landscape and community. This project is funded by the Community Preservation Commission. We're very grateful for the funding, which makes it possible for me to make these extensive slideshows and then do these programs, which themselves become a document in the collection of the Leverett Historical Commission. Today we'll be talking about the charcoal kiln in Leverett. I want to thank the Leverett Historical Commission, the Leverett CPC, the Leverett Historical Society, and Eliot Sherman. I want to give a big thank you to Eva Gibavic, whose vast stock of knowledge of Leverett history, experience with mapping and videography, and hours of research are foundational as well as indispensable to this project. With today's program, we are segueing from this part of the Sense of Where You Are project. In 3 years, we have visited 8 mill sites, and today we visit the kiln. There are many more sites in Leverett, but many are on private property or not very accessible. We're working to continue the effort by working on or supporting work on historic sites, creating signage, and continuing to work towards the preservation of the landscape heritage of industrial activity in Leverett. I would like to pause to honor the work of Eva Gibavic. I get paid for most of what I do here, but Eva volunteers her time, and it is a lot of time. She shared her deed research, perfectly organized. Time and again, she will go back to a site to film or photograph some more because I'm an hour away, or go to take another look at some of more tax records. For this one, she went over and above the call of duty to try and get a good record of the kiln, which involved walking around it dozens and dozens of times with a tall pole in her hands on which a camera, and also climbing up and down a stepladder every 3 steps, like a pilgrim making prostrations, but in reverse, to try and get a good look at the roof. Without Eva, these programs would be thin and sorry indeed. In the process, I have learned a lot from her, for which I am grateful, but more than anything, she has been a pleasure to work with and go exploring with, which I hope we will never stop doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
As has become usual, we will first get a sense of a layout of the site, then we'll do a video visit, and then we'll explore how the site worked as well as its history. That's what we have prepared. The research has not been exhaustive. There's much more to be done. But we're also cognizant of the fact that there are people in Leverett who know a lot more, who have insights, who want to make contributions to the program. So as we segue into a new phase of the project, we invite any of them who are present to step forward and tell us what they would like to share. The Leverett Historical Commission is, as Susan alluded to, starting to gather what we're calling embodied history of these sites. That is, the memories and experiences from people who work there. We hope to start with the charcoal industry in February. So if you know anyone who has first-hand knowledge, please let us know. Come along with us on a journey to visit the Howard's family charcoal kiln, now owned by Eliot Sherman. You are invited to fill holes, correct me, and ask questions along the way. Put them into the chat, raise your hand. However, I can't see you at this moment, as I too have the slideshow in front of my face, so make a sound if you need to. In North Leverett, you will find a charcoal kiln. It is the last remaining structure of the Leverett charcoal industry, but also one of the last of a unique type of charcoal kiln used commonly between the last quarter of the 19th century and the middle of the 20th centuries, including heavy use and expansion during World War II. By the early 1990s, making charcoal in a kiln like this had become too environmentally costly and frankly offensive, and the industry looked elsewhere. This is what the kiln looks like from the road. It is on private property, and the Leverett Historical Commission asks that you respect the owner's wish that you stay off his land unless explicit permission has been given. The kiln sits behind an unstable retaining wall that, if you get too close, could cave in unexpectedly with great injury to you and the kiln. In addition, the kiln itself is in bad shape, and as a result, a very dangerous place to be anywhere near. Our estimation is that the dome could come down at any moment. If the dome falls, it will take some of the walls with it, and that will be a grand and big boom. And if you're anywhere near, you will be hurt badly. So you can see the kiln here, and there's that wall. So we're getting a little bit closer. Of course, we, the professionals, have gone a little bit closer, but that's for documenting the kiln. So here's a close-up shot, and this is the upper door to the kiln. The kiln itself is about 20 feet tall to that upper part there, maybe even a little bit taller. And please note that the cracks in this wall, and that's a 10-foot wall, retaining wall. Charcoal kilns, especially of this variety, stood a lot less time than, let's say, cathedrals. They saw hard use and frequently blew up. Once abandoned, they are fragile structures because they have domed roofs and slanted walls. Gravity takes them down quickly. Though charcoal was made in most towns in Massachusetts in the 18th and 19th centuries, and in the 17th century too, kilns do not show up on the historic maps that we have. Whereas mills and blacksmith shops, which use the charcoal, show up on the 1870s map, for instance, I have not found charcoal kilns on them. That is, I have looked at a bunch of the 1870s maps from different towns, and I have not found any charcoal kilns. I have not, however, looked at each and every one for the Massachusetts towns. The first map to show what are here called coke kilns, coke ovens rather, is the 1964 USGS Shutesbury topo that shows, as we can see here, 3 kilns, 2 sheds, and a building to the side. The 1990 topo shows 2 kilns side by side. Here you see them, 1 smaller building, and then also the new larger building that was visible on one of the photographs we just saw. I don't know if you notice it, you'll see it again. And we're doing our usual thing here, exploring all the different maps and seeing what they can tell us. An aerial photograph from the 2000 teens. It's wonderful to go on Google Earth. You can choose which is the clearest aerial photograph for that particular site. Note the kiln here, the large building, and 2 small buildings to the north and east of the kilns. The north is in this direction to the left. There is no sign of the second and third kiln that were on the topo, right? The large pile of stones by the small building, which we at first thought might be some kind of foundation, but we have found out it is incidental and has nothing to do with the charcoal industry. As usual, we are going to the LiDAR, and here is the LiDAR photograph of the area, and you can see the road and the river, and you can see the buildings. Here's a building, there's a building. You can see stone walls here, here, and actually here, although this is a little bit distorted here. You can see the kiln, and you can actually see the kiln remnants here. And then there are also some kind of ground disturbances in these places. So those are the things that we're going to be looking for when we're doing our research. The first thing we're going to do is take a little trip to the mill. I mean, I'm so used to mills. We're going to take a trip to the kiln, and it's going to be a little bit different from usual. Here you can see the kiln as it is, can be seen only on the screen because it's surrounded by a lot of trees and a lot of brush, and it's really hard to get any kind of decent photograph. So instead of videoing, what we've decided to do is go with drone video and Eva's photogrammetry. And so Eva is going to do that, which means that I have to stop my screen sharing, and Eva is going to share her screen and take you along on a little ride.
All righty. So first I want to thank Bob Dolan, who did this drone video, and it was one of those things where Carol Heim and I were out taking lots of photographs, and Bob came by and said, hey, wouldn't it be cool to get some drone footage? And I said, yeah, and he did. And so this is the beaver pond at the end of Richardson Road. This up here in the skyline is Mount Monadnock. Lake Wyola is over here. Obviously, this is the power line. And we are moving on in to North Leverett Road and Rattlesnake Gutter. And there's the Sawmill River, and here we go. This round circle in the middle is the kiln from above. And again, drone video moving in. Now I did this walking, but it wasn't nearly as nice as and smooth as the drone does. Looking down through from one opening to another. And now we're jumping down to that other opening. You can see that this kiln is 3 bricks deep. And here we have the inside. Now, one of the rules of the game here is that I could not go in, which was really, really hard. But I was able to put a camera on a long pole and push it in, and I was able to push in lights on long pieces of boards so that we could see the inside of it more easily. We're going to switch to the photogrammetry model. Now, we've done one of these before, but essentially what we have here is pictures There over 1,400 pictures that make up this model. And so as Pleun said, I spent a whole lot of time walking around this place with a long pole and a camera, dodging trees and taking a lot of pictures.
So one of the things that you can see here is that, as you'll find out later, when you build the kiln, it has three rows of holes at the bottom. And here you can only see two. And that's because the kiln has a skirt of all these bricks that have fallen out of the top half of it. Can you see how the top half is so much more eaten at than the bottom half? And here you can see the bittersweet that's going up and growing into the top.
So one of the things that this program allows me to do is take out many of the trees. So here you get a partial tree. Here there's a telephone pole that I took out, and it allows you to see things more clearly when you take them out. I decided not to take out the trees that were on top. And this is where, in addition to the video that Bob Dolan did, he was able to get the pictures of the top with the drone.
So what I want to show people is that why we say that we think it's about to fall in, which is what we can see because of all this, that we couldn't otherwise. Yeah, this is pretty good. I don't know if you guys can see, maybe you can indicate it with your cursor, Eva, if you can see the two metal bands that are holding the top in. I will be explaining later how the kiln is built, but those metal bands are essential for the structure of the roof. They hold all the bricks in place, and they have slipped. You see that one here, the top band has slipped. And there is a dent in the roof here. If you look, I don't know if you can see, but on the right, the roof just comes down in a reasonably even arch, and on the left, it has a slump. And so this is why, as soon as it's slumped enough that the tension is no longer on the bricks, it's going to fall. And that could be tomorrow, or it could be 3 months from now, but it could be a year, but it could be tomorrow. Okay, that was what I had to say.
So I just wanted to show you the top of this roof. And again, Pleun will be talking about how that was made. But it's truly amazing.
It's so beautiful. I just love it. Here you can really see how the distance between those bands is different on that side.
Yeah.
Can you see the wall at all when you turn back, or is that not part of the model?
No, it's there.
Your computer is saying you're making me work too fast. So do you see the metal piece there? That's one of the doors. That's the door that was used to close off the access panel.
From looking at some of the photographs, I wonder whether this was actually the door that went on the lower level, and that would be where they put the flame in.
No, they put the flame in at the upper level.
Oh, okay, well, that's why it would be there then. Okay.
So you can see that this wall kind of embraces. It's really a protective wall. It both provides access to that upper door, and it provides protection from the wind. I'm wondering if you can see the other half of the wall at all, or not.
Here?
No, closer to us. if you rotate a little bit more back. So this wall is actually part of a pair of walls. And there's right here in the front, some of it has fallen in. You can see how it has fallen in and is continuing to fall in. But a little to the left of where that's happening, I think it's not part of the model. And why should it be? There's another protective wall just like it.
Yeah, it would have been over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, every time we walked around in a circle, it was, you could see that this was getting ready to fall down. And we'd brush by it sometimes and a stone would fall down. So it is in dangerous condition.
Yeah.
Is there anything else on this you'd like me to show?
Not particularly. You'd see, here's the other door, you can see. Just let people have another look, because this, you'll never be able to see the kiln like this in its own sitting there. You notice that there is a little roof over the door, and that's something that I have been able to use to date photographs actually. Let's start. And you can see that it's a little bit hard to see, but that there's a pile, that the bricks are piled up against the bottom. I think that's pretty good. I think we've done it.
All right, back to you.
Does anybody have any questions at this time other than about how it's constructed? Because that's going to be part of the presentation. So
One thing I did want to say is that one of the other things I did was this 360 panoramic photograph. I have a camera that takes, it goes around in a circle and it goes up and over. And it's a great tool. I didn't include it here, but we do have that video. It's a little hard to control it on a screen, so.
yeah, right. Which is good for the documentation. That's really good. And in this photograph, you can really see how the ramp was built. This is really an access ramp for going into the top here. And when you see old photographs, you'll see wood stacked here. But there's more to the site than the kiln, because if you recall, there were the foundations on the LiDAR also of the other two kilns. And if you step away from the standing kiln, there's another wall coming in from the road, which you can see here. And another arched concrete wall that you can see here that's just like the one behind the kiln. And if you look more closely, this is a little bit closer, you will see some metal framing right there. Losing my text again. Big straps, like the ones that hold in the top, that hold the arch of the standing kiln in place. A metal door, like the one on the other kiln. In fact, there's a circular mound, and I don't know if you can see it, but this is sort of like a mound here, right? That is about the size of the standing kiln, which is about 100 feet in diameter. The kiln itself is about 36 to 38 feet, depending on whether you're looking on the inside in diameter, and a little bit over 20 high. And if you look closely at this mound, which I did by having a very weird edit of this photograph, you can see that the mound consists of bricks. These are all bricks. All these green mossy things are bricks. So this is one of the two kiln remains we saw on the LiDAR, and it's here. The other one is also, as we saw on the LiDAR, it's right next to it. And that concrete arch here abuts another one that you can't see that on this photograph, but there's another concrete arch. And here you can see how long those arched walls are, right? This is the arched wall. Here is actually the concrete one, I think. It's really hard to see. This is another circular kiln foundation. In the foreground here, you see a bump, and here you see some metal strapping, and that metal strapping, I think, is from the wood that they used to burn in the kiln. It came in great bundles strapped. And on closer inspection, again, you'll see bricks covered in moss. And so this here too is another circular, and I can't get the perspective on this quite right on this in this photo, but there it is. Various kiln parts are standing and lying around. There's actually some metal here that you can't really see in this particular photo, but here you can see it. Some more photos of the second wall and remains. Here you can really see the arch of the wall. And this is the ramp, and actually the big kiln has lying behind it, between the wall and the kiln, pieces of the ramp that used to be there. There's a lot here. It's a ramp into the top door. In addition to that, the site also has, near the kiln, completely within a big tangle of bittersweet that I had to crawl under, are the rusting remains of a conveyor machine of some kind. And I asked Eliot about it, and he says he bought it along with the site, and he could never figure out how it might have been used, because the charcoal, when it comes out of the kiln, is pretty large. However, they did use to break it up into small pieces. So he speculated that Wayne Howard may have bought it, meaning to adapt it, that it was maybe, I thought maybe it might be used to fill bags, shovel up enough charcoal for one bag. I don't know. But it's sitting there. It's pretty neat for people who like steampunk, especially. So I created a situational sketch, what the site looks like. Here is, here's a new building. Here's another building, and there is the other building that we saw on the aerial photograph. You will see the north on this photo points left. That's because this thing gets turned around once in a while. Once we start to enter the site and look at photos, we will use the perspective of a person who was working there, and from which most of the photos were taken, which is from the direction of the river. But right now we're sort of looking at it as if it were the direction of the road. And so here you see these ramps, and here is the kiln that is standing with metal pieces around it. We think that there was a kiln planned for here, that they were in the process of building another unit like this. We know that they were planning to build at least one other at some point. So we think that's why that wall was built. And then here are the remains of the two kilns. And one of the things that is so obvious is that the metal pieces of all of them are really very similar to each other. So they were built within a time frame that almost like the same person made them, right? I mean, two people can make the same thing and they come out very differently looking, and these look almost identical. So that is one of the things that is rather remarkable about them, and also gives us a good hint that these three kilns were built within a certain amount of time from each other. Are there any questions at this moment that anybody has? I don't see any. So I'm going to continue on because I have a lot. Let me see where I am in my time. So charcoal is wood with a whole bunch of stuff removed by heating it. And, why do we want charcoal so much? What we remove is water, wood tar or creosote, methanol, and methane gas. And this here is just the molecular structure of charcoal. The resulting product is much lighter than wood and thus easy to ship. It burns cleanly and hotly. and was used for all sorts of things from iron smelting to blacksmithing to fueling cook stoves and making gunpowder. By the third quarter of the 19th century, however, a whole bunch of these uses have been replaced by various cheaper and more efficient commodities, such as cokes from bitumen, I don't know how to say that word even, bitumen coal. Real charcoal is still used today a lot in filtering to treat stomach ailments and poisoning, and in pigments and art. The byproducts of making charcoal are both useful and polluting substances in their own right. In previous centuries, wood tar was used to keep ships and roofs watertight. Wood tar is antimicrobial. When I was a kid, and in Europe, tar salve was still used by many people instead of iodine. The wood tar should not be confused with the very toxic coal tar that we see on the roads. Nowadays, mostly charcoal is the byproduct of industrial processes like biomass plants. So instead of the byproducts, the main product being charcoal and the byproducts being these other things, it's now the other way around. And methane, as you know, is one of the most potent greenhouse gases when not burnt. And so one of the things that comes free when you make charcoal is unburnt methane. But in a liquid form, methane is a fuel. And here is the beautiful methane, which almost looks the same like the coal molecule. I'm going to show you a small video because this is about how do we make charcoal, right? What is the story on charcoal? And I thought I have a little video for you. In the 18th and 19th centuries, iron smelting and blacksmithing were largely fueled by charcoal. While iron smelting is not so much a local activity, blacksmithing was everywhere. And we saw in the last program that with trip hammers, local metal production was not limited to generalized blacksmiths and specialized machine shops, but also involved making tool pieces for the larger markets. While water power was essential for the energy needed to shape the iron, charcoal provided a much hotter fire than wood for softening it. Charcoal is not difficult to produce, but if you do it wrong, you get wood ash, so it takes skill. Plus, it is a dirty job that is tough on the environment, and it can explode on you. Today, we in private life mostly use charcoal for cooking backyard hamburgers, and even that, few of us do it that way anymore. Nonetheless, there are lots of DIY videos about how to make charcoal. Basically, you're trying to smolder wood so that it won't burn up. So you set it on fire, and then you dampen down the oxygen that can get to it. Until the 19th century, most charcoal was made in covered pits right where the trees were, which is handy, but not very efficient. But nonetheless, the charcoal is easier to move than the trees. So kilns, that's why kilns became the place to do it, because it's so inefficient to do it in the pits, which are chambers made of stone or brick with holes that you can stop up. So here's the shortest video on charcoal making that I could find.
Start with 2 barrels. First barrel gets holes punched in it down there, gets the top cut out. The second barrel turns into a cylinder. Pack it as full of wood as you can vertically, as densely as you can. Then you're going to start a fire on top. All right, after your fire gets started, the cylinder with an afterburner gets set on top. Okay, after the fire started, set the second barrel on top. Let it ride for about 2.5 hours. All right, when you see red coals at the bottom through your air holes, go ahead and shovel dirt around the bottom of it, snuff the fire out. And then we're gonna put a lid on the barrel. After you got the bottom covered and the top closed, just let it sit. All right, after it cools down, this is what you're left with. Let it cool all night. We'll separate out what didn't charcoal from the barrel with the next batch.
That's how you make charcoal.
Pleun, there is a question. Steve has a question.
Okay, my question actually goes back a little ways, but it had to do with the retaining wall and the other stone wall in the images you were showing earlier.
Mhm.
Now, if we want to go back to that at this point, but that's what I had questions about. But basically, I wanted to understand the function of those walls.
Okay.
And for instance, why the kiln wasn't built at the same level as the land, although it's hard to tell if that was just if it was, and then this other earth was piled up for some purpose, or what?
I think it was piled up, yeah. So the kiln was built, I think, on the ground, and then they created this huge ramp. And the ramp is, the purpose of the ramp is to get into the second floor of the kiln. So you can see here on this slide, you can see this metalwork, and that is the framework of the ramp that used to go in, because as I'll explain later, of how you pack the kiln and how you burn it. So you need access to the bottom door as well as to the top door. But the other thing is, Wayne Howard said in his notes on the charcoal industry that it is a good thing to build a kiln away from the breezes, to protect it, because the more breezes you have, the more air infiltration you're going to have, and the more air infiltration you have, the less the lesser is your quality of charcoal, the less efficient is your kiln. So it has a twofold purpose.
So I understand then that the retaining wall and the side stone wall were designed to make it possible to have this earth up where you could load the upper part of the kiln. Why was the retaining wall all the way around the kiln?
I think that's to protect it from the breezes, but that's just my guess at it, because he remarked that his father had built his first kiln in a protected spot.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right. Let me see if I can move forward without, hang on, I need to do this through the navigator. Okay. All right, here we are. Okay, so this is a drawing of a charcoal kiln. This is one, you have seen this on the PR, on the same model and principles as the one in Leverett, except it is a little bit smaller. The drawing is from a book about mining practices from 1875. This period is also the heyday of the beehive coke kilns. So coke, and it is essentially the same process, but coke is a refined version of bituminous coal instead of wood. So you do the same thing to coal that you do to wood, and then you get coke, which is also cleaner burning than coal and more efficient. Let's see. So as we said, previously charcoal was often made on site where the trees were cut down, and also in rectangular kilns, at least according to Professor Eggleston. However, rectangular kilns were found to be inefficient and difficult to deal with because of their corners, which you have to heat, and also because it's hard to get the stuff out of there. Beehive kilns, of course, also have their drawbacks, chiefly among them their tendency to periodically blow up and the essential fragilities of the bricks, which under the influence of temperature changes and freezing cycles tend to develop gapping, thus letting air in and weakening the kiln. And of course, compared to a rectangular kiln, their unstable shape and dome. So I said that before, but if you build a wall that is not vertical, then gravity wants to pull it down, and a dome is under tension and works fine so long as it's under tension. But you take the tension away, and your dome is gone. My estimation is that this kiln is about 2/3 of the size of the ones in Leverett, which were said to take 80 or so boards of wood to fill. The kiln in the drawing, Professor Eggleston asserted in 1879, takes 36,000 bricks to build. Kilns of this shape are, he also said, are being rapidly given up. It has been found much more economical to construct and manage small conical kilns than large round ones. And these conical kilns are gradually taking the place of the large ones of other shapes. And a conical kiln can be found, fortunately for us, also in this neighborhood in Hawley. So here's the drawing, you see the door. This is a slightly different model. It doesn't have an upper door, instead it has a hole in the roof. So it's a slightly different model. All of which sets the stage for seeing what happened with Leverett's charcoal industry. We don't know a whole lot about it, and that is one place where more research needs to be done. But not much charcoal manufacturing is found in the tax books. But we have to do a much more exhaustive search. It's possible it was subsumed under the logging heading. What we do know comes from the Massachusetts censuses of 1855 and 1865 and the census of 1890. So it's there to be found. Together, they suggest that there was a lively charcoal business in the 1850s. But as you can see here, 60,000 bushels, and the value is $4,800, and 14 hands are employed in 1855. However, in 1865, you can see it's 7,000 bushels, a tenth of what it was before. Of course, people have gone to war, and the hands employed only 2. So if that's a trend, which I think it probably was, it is then continued in 1890. You can see charcoal and kindlers. You can see that there's only one manufacturer, and that's actually Amos Howard, right, as we know. But the picture of the industry is really that it was a widespread craft practiced by a lot of different people, not all of whom were full-time or pros. And then it sort of starts to narrow down to a few manufacturers with, more skilled labor and more machinery, in this case, a kiln. So that's the picture of the Leverett industry. Oh, I should say that Eva's mother, Annette, and Betsy Douglas wrote a pamphlet called The Leverett Charcoal Industry, based on articles, research, and writings by Wayne Howard. And that's in the collection of the Historical Society. So there's, of course, a lot of questions, right? When was this kiln built? Who owned it? What was it used for? And what can we learn from it today? And I'm going to try to answer all of those in the next less than 40 minutes. So I better get going. So the project at hand is to learn more about the Howard Kiln and the charcoal business in Leverett. Due to the family nature of the business, we don't have a whole series of deeds, etc. Many of our facts come from Wayne Howard, who did extensive narration of his family's business, which is also at the Leverett Historical Society. In 1881, Amos Howard built the first commercial charcoal kiln in Leverett, according to Wayne, on what is now Old Coke Kiln Road. And you can see here the old map. And he leased land from Edward Glazier. And Wayne says, I have the original lease given by Edward Glazier to Amos Howard. It was dated March 6, 1884 for $5 per year for the use of land and buildings. I don't know what to make of the discrepancy between 1881 and 1884, except to say that Wayne said 1881 at one moment and 1884 at another. And somewhere else he mentions that he did build an earlier kiln, which almost immediately fell in, and that he built another one in 1884-85. So I'm not totally sure, but somewhere in there he started to work on it. So I'm hoping that since Wayne Howard wrote he had to lease, his family still have it. He at another place quotes the deed and says a piece of property for a coal kiln and woodlot, which suggests to me that Amos built a kiln or had it built rather than that he got a kiln that was already there. So the charcoal that he produced was used by Hadley and Hatfield tobacco farmers in curing tobacco. Nothing else new under the sun there. So We think that this might be the kiln in Prescott or North Dana that later, much later, Ethan Howard operated. And I'm showing it here in the slideshow because this photo dates back to circa 1900, according to the Jones Library. And it is the best, oldest, best, and clearest historical photo of this kind of kiln that we have. And it has the same brick pattern as the kiln in Leverett. So I think it might be that Amos built a kiln like this. He certainly had Professor Eggleston's article, perhaps, who knows, which actually explains how to build one. Or he had the people who had given Professor Eggleston his information, who knows. In any case, Amos Howard operated the kiln, but he died in 1900. He had a heart problem, and I had a whole thing about it that I seem to have lost. So I don't know where that went. Sorry, now I'm clicking back and forth. In any case, Amos Howard did a lot of things and was a lot of things for Leverett, and he worked his kiln. He had a heart problem, and his son Ethan started helping. Ethan started helping him probably towards the end of his life. But in 1900, when he died, his wife, Helen Sophia Dodge Howard, took over work with the kiln. At this period, we don't have taxes for Leverett, which are missing in action. So we're not able to confirm any of that or see how much she produced. That would have been nice to know. In any case, Ethan steps in along with his brother Burton, and they start working with their mother on the kiln. All of them, other than probably Helen, also had other jobs on the side. As you can see, Ethan was a shopkeeper, he was postmaster, he was Leverett highway superintendent, he was logger, and he was a charcoal manufacturer. So he did a lot of different things. By no means was charcoal his only business. He and his wife, Eva May Glazier, had 14 children. His brother also worked a kiln with him. He kept shop with him and then later worked a kiln with him. Unfortunately, he died in 1916 and Ethan bought him out. I think Ethan was a man who I'm started to call him the kiln builder, because he, I think, was the man who really said, I really need to do this. So Sophia died in 1926 and the business became Ethan's alone. Kilns get tired and worn out, and by 1930 he was working that kiln in Prescott, or he says, Wayne says it's the North Dana kiln. That's what it was called, but it was in Prescott. And he built a new kiln, the first one in the current location, in 1931. And I think that would be the kiln the furthest along. So if the current kiln standing is here, and then there's these two other foundations, the one, if you're facing them, the one to the right, where there is the least of a mound, is the one that was built in 1931. A story he often told was that the Thomas brothers from Turner's Falls, nor he had ever really built a kiln before, and they disagreed on how to construct the roof. The masons won out, and the kiln roof came down almost immediately after Ethan had fired it up. He had to jump out. And so apparently the next spring, the Thomas brothers came back and said, okay, we'll build it for you now according to your plan. And I think according to his plan is how that one got built, this one got built, and the third one as well. During the 1930s, the business grew, especially with the Prescott Kiln and the participation of two of Ethan's sons, Ethan Jr. and Wayne. Wayne remembered his first driving adventure after he had his license was getting tools and things from the kiln site in Prescott, which was slated to go underwater in the Quabbin Reservoir. And there's a film about what's underwater in the Quabbin Reservoir, and they mention the kiln in there, but they don't dive anywhere near it, which I would love to see that. The first tax records we've been able to locate date to 1939, when Ethan is taxed on 2 kilns. In years before, even when tax records do exist, there are no taxes paid on the kilns that we have been able to find. However, the business boomed with the onset of World War II, even before American participation on the war theater, and Ethan built a 3rd kiln in 1940. So this one is the first one. He then built a 2nd one, which I neglected to mention here, a couple of years later, again, also with the Thomas brothers. And so he was then working these 2 kilns. And then in 1940, he built a third one, presumably with Wayne, right? Which is how Wayne knew about how to do that. As you can see, we sort of have gathered up which one was which. And we think that this first one was torn down in 1965 by Wayne when it became unstable, that the middle one was still standing after Wayne had stopped producing into the 1980s. There's a thing from the 1980s by Wayne where he says it's still standing. Eliot Sherman, who owned it by then, remembers that it fell in and he had to tear it down because it was a dangerous site. And then, of course, there's the 3rd one. Now, Ethan was a man who clearly liked building kilns, because in World War II, they were planning to build 2 more. But instead of doing that, he went off to Connecticut and helped people in Union build 3 kilns on the same model, except with 2 feet thick walls, apparently, in Union. And those kilns, I cannot find. I have scoured over the satellite photos of Union and I can't find them. So I think they're gone. So this one is the only one still standing. During the war, Ethan paid taxes on 3 kilns, and they were producing 1,000 tons of charcoal a year, all under government contract. And this is for gas masks, for dealing with wounds and illnesses. And I don't think they were making gunpowder anymore with it then. Somebody asked, where did the bricks come from? That's a piece of the research that I tried to do, but I think I didn't mention that the bricks are a little bit larger than normal bricks, and they have no markings on them whatsoever, which is unfortunate. The bricklayers were from Turner's Falls, the first ones, and then the first 2 kilns, and the 3rd one was a guy from Greenfield. I'm wondering if they weren't specially made. They're a little bit larger than your normal brick. So I don't know where they're from. That would take a whole nother effort in materials research that we could undertake, which would be really great to do. Also, this kiln was, according to Wayne, built with the bricks from the first kiln, the one that was on Old Coke Kiln Road. So it'd be really interesting to see if these, and the bricks are there. It'd be really interesting to see if they are the same bricks or different bricks. The metalwork is all very similar, but these are the older bricks probably. Oh, this is great. Dennis Picard, thank you, Dennis. Black powder that uses charcoal was still used in some artillery shells during World War II. Wow, I didn't expect that. I thought that by World War II, everybody was wanting to have a more explosive, and I'm sure that Dennis can explain the difference, but a more explosive thing to push their shells out. So Ethan Howard was the great kiln builder, with Wayne Howard following him. His first kiln was the 31 kiln, and whether he built his first kiln along the model and the one that his father has built in 1885 to replace the one that he built in 81 is not clear. We know that it was made of bricks, of course, the first one, and not of stones, because the bricks were reused. right? Wayne did leave instructions on how to build a kiln. As Professor Eggleston had noted, the walls were stepped back a ½ inch at every course and a foot thick with 3 courses of bricks, and the dome was built of bricks on end held together by a metal band. So you have to sort of imagine that within that metal band is holding together very tightly bricks that are all stacked on edge. And this is not a simple proposition. And the way you can see it here, let's see where it is. Here we go. The bricks of the roof were mortared in place, standing on, and so they built a wooden structure inside with pieces of wood on stakes, like a mushroom. And then they used that to hold the bricks in place, and they mortared them all in place next to each other, right on top of that thing. And once they had all of that in place, they put those bands around it tightly as they could. And then once the bands are on and the wooden pieces are removed, gravity locks the bricks in place in the bands, if that makes any sense. And he says 50,000 bricks were used, 6 tons of cement, and 2.5 tons of unslaked lime. I'm not sure exactly what that is. Philip Johnson says the temporary wooden structure is called false work. That's right. And so that's how it was done. But he leaves, these instructions, and he also this wooden stick, he explains that they use that to step in each course ½ inch. So the first course, the wooden stick is just totally as long as the inside of the kiln, and you just move it around and you put your brick down, just like he has here in this drawing, and then you cut ½ inch off the stick, and you move the stick up a little bit in the middle, and then you go around again and you just go to the end of the stick, and then you repeat that to cutting off ½ inch, and you pile a couple of bricks under it in the middle, and then you go up, and you do this with every course. It's a very much a carpenter's trick, is that instead of measuring, you use a stick to give you the distance. Let's see. Right, and so it was Ethan and Ted Cromack, whoever, I don't know his name, but you guys might, did the work on that. And Dennis Picard says unslaked lime has not been mixed with water, which creates a thermal reaction. So Dennis, does that mean that it's put on, and then when the water comes on it, when it rains, it sort of sets it in place?
Yeah, basically, when you slake lime, like to create what's used for whitewash, and it does create a very heat intensive reaction. It gets very, very hot. So unslaked lime would be just a lime after it comes from its kiln and its ground.
Okay, and how do you use it? You just use it on the outside?
You can use it actually to make an addition to mortar, or you can use it like as a whitewash. Slake lime is whitewashed.
Exactly. So they use it, I think, as a whitewash on the top. One of the things Wayne said is that you have to whitewash it after every burn, the top. So, all right. So we have some photos from Bob inside the dome. Ta-da! Here it is. And one of the things we can see is that here and there, you can see in some places there's a lot of white. A lot of this is lime, this whiteness here, but there's some other places where there's more white. And I had a good photo of that, but I have so many photos in this slideshow. And I think that that's where the top is leaking water. And I think that's a problem. So that's another thing that talks about. And here you can see that there's some iffiness where the brick is starting to fall apart, where it's red here. The brick is starting to crumble And so that's not a good sign either.
The place where you think it's gonna leak is where the vines are growing. So that makes some sense.
Yeah, it's their roots that are doing it. So yeah, in here, I think this might be the sag. I don't know. I'm not sure. And here you can see some more. This is around the upper window. You can see how the bricks are starting to lose their integrity as bricks. See here. So let's talk a little bit about the kilns and how they worked and what it is. So first of all, I just wanted to show you some really good photos. This is a photo of unknown date, but I think that it's in possibly in the 30s. The kilns certainly don't have those little roofies on them, which they do show on later photos. So, and also given what the wheels look like here and what these guys look like, I think it might be in the 30s. So the kilns here are in staging, and I think that's because, excuse me, of that whitewashing they did with the kilns after each and every burn. Here are thank you to Matt Howard, who gave us pictures of the charcoal bag of Ethan Howard's when it was Ethan Howard's, along with an original crate with charcoal in it. In 46, Ethan retired because he had a stroke, although he still operated a small store and a gas station. The three sons took over, that is Ethan Howard, Ethan Jr., Wayne, and Gordon Howard. They all had other jobs as well. And as you can see here, this is the 1940 kiln, which I think is the one that we're still standing, except it did also blow up in 46. Right. The business was always taxed on 2 kilns, although 3 were standing. And so this is in 46, the kiln breaks apart, it blows up. You can see here all the charcoal coming out of it. And here you see the two older kilns. You can see the whitewash on them here. There's not that much on here. And this is the one that was taken down in 65, and this is the one that when this photograph was taken, I think it should be unknown date before 1985 and not 65, because that's when it was taken down. In 1959, there was a big article in the Springfield Republican about the business, which gave us some good photos. You see here Arthur Wheeler and Lauren Graves. Lauren Graves is on the left, stacking slabs against the interior walls of a kiln. Loading the kiln took about 5 days. As with other types of charcoal making, you load as tightly as much as you can, first through the lower door and then through the upper door via the ramp. This is, of course, coming from Wayne Howard, right? The Howards made charcoal with, at least in this period, with pine slab cutoffs, presumably from sawmills. And in various photos, you can see the enormous amount of wood stacked on the site. It took more than 75 cords to load one of these kilns. Those of you who burn wood in the winter know what a cord looks like. The bands that held together the bundles are all over the site. And here you can see, here's another photo from the 1946 kiln fire, but you can also see the enormous amounts of wood that are stacked here. You see that? There's another pile here. The wood inside was piled very compactly with the space on the floor for air circulation, you know, where those first row of holes is. And in the middle, space was left for a fire box with access to the upper door. Then the kiln is closed and the fire is lit through the top door. Due to the 3 holes in the bottom, you can really see them here, right? Here's 1, 2, 3. The kiln has a complex air circulation, much like a modern wood stove, that spreads the fire throughout the kiln and yet keeps it at a low flame. This puts a lot of gases in the air in the kiln, and if it is to blow up, it is likely to be in the first 12 to 24 hours. Although I was surprised to see that in the 46 photo, that looked like it had gone longer than the 12 to 24 hours. The air holes are then plugged up, and it's as needed to control the burn. And so at some point, air is going in through the bottom layer of air holes, and it's coming out as smoke on the second and third layer. The kiln that's still standing also has 2 pipes going in on either side of the top door. Wayne did not mention what these are for, so I don't know what they're for. The entire process takes weeks, up to 5 weeks, I think he talked about. As with the selection of a pope, things are going well when the smoke is white. But with the kiln, when the white smoke stops and becomes clear or blue, the work is done. And so here you can see, this is Ethan Jr. Pushing the door, really wedging the door shut. You can see here this is I would imagine that this is the 1940 kiln. You can see the little roofie here, and you can again see the lime on the outside. Okay, so the need towards the 60s and 70s, the need for charcoal steadily diminished. When Wayne decided to get out of the business, he sold the kilns to a company that operated them until 1974 or so, selling charcoal in retail and to industry. When they stopped, the kilns became a question. Wayne Howard told about redoing the cement wash on the roof after each burn, pointing up the bricks every few years, and covering the entire kiln in a half-inch of mortar cement. This photo from 1974 shows that the half-inch covering of mortar that keeps the kilns airtight and safe from the weather has started to flake off. The kilns were in need of maintenance. This was also the first time that the Leverett Historical Community started to wonder whether they could save the kilns. And I saw your note, but I'm just gonna push through, and then I'm hoping that you'll tell us about your grandfather. In 1977, Eliot and Rosemary Sherman purchased the kilns, but there was no future in charcoal burning. They had to shut down the business in the early 1980s due to increased environmental and air quality concerns. Sometime after 1985, the older kiln fell in, and Eliot, as he told me, had to take it down. So here you can see a photograph of 2 of the Connecticut kilns. Possible that there's a third one in the back there, but I'm not sure. 2 of the kilns in Connecticut that were built with the help of Ethan, and you see that they're in that same kind of staging, and they're firing. And this is in 1949, and they too produced nonstop during World War II. But in 1986, they received a final order from the Environmental Protection Agency to operate only with the help of a special smoke incinerator for the gases that came free with the process. The company had complied with the EPA's requirements, but the writing was on the wall. And I just want to, if you imagine, there are all these holes going around, and so you have to somehow catch the gases that are coming out of each and every one of all those holes, right? It's a little bit complex. But I think the writing was on the wall, both from the EPA and the decline in domestic and traditional craft use of charcoal. Soon it would no longer be feasible for a charcoal kiln of this kind to be operated with a mobile incinerator to catch the gases. On November 27, 1993, one of the kilns in Connecticut exploded. According to satellite photos, there are no longer any charcoal kilns at the company's address in Union. So here we see the kiln today. it is going to fall down. A large bittersweet vine has climbed up the east side and is all over the roof, putting down roots. Trees are growing out of the roof. Due to Eva's excellent work in documenting the kiln, we know that the bands holding the dome in place have slipped and the dome has developed a sag. As you may recall, the dome is held entirely in place by gravity due to those bands. That means that the roof is going to fall in any moment now. There is no more pointing up. The sides are doing better, although the upper parts, as you can see here in this photograph, very clearly are quite compromised, and each half-inch step is providing a nice foothold for plants. It doesn't look like they each step half an inch back, but they do. When you get close, you see that. You can see that the upper half is much more compromised than the lower, and a 2-foot deep layer of bricks here that have popped out due to stresses and weather surrounds the kiln. When the roof falls in, the walls will go. It's not that the walls are not standing by themselves, they are, but just the violence of the roof going in will make some of the walls go. As such, the kiln today has no future. By the way, here you say Eva with her pole, and that's only halfway up, right? That pole becomes 19 feet long, and she's still walking around.
30 feet.
Well, right, I mean, in this case,
Yeah.
it goes 19, 20 feet up, and she's still walking around, which is, you know, quite the upper body feat, I would say. Here you can really see a detail on what is all missing on the side here. Okay, so now I'm going to say something that I want to make clear that I'm speaking for myself and not for the Leverett Historical Commission, and that I speak as a builder as much as a historian. I feel sad that this heritage in the Leverett landscape is going to be lost. When the bricks come down, Eliot is going to have to repeat what he had to do before, which is to get a bulldozer and flatten the kiln. Otherwise, it's too dangerous a place to leave standing. The bricks at that time will be of interest to any and all and perhaps disappear. And in that context, I think the only future for this site might lie in the protections that come with designating it as a historic site in some way. The protection is legal and it is psychological and social. It is legal in the sense that it gives the owner some way to lower his liability. And it is psychological and social in the sense that it is a lot more difficult to take a brick from a place that has a sign that says, in effect, this is important industrial heritage for this town. Do not take the bricks. Than from a place where there's a pile of bricks that nobody appears to want. The optimist in me says that if someone surrounds the kiln with staging, arrests the bittersweet, and finds a way to let the dome come down in a controlled manner, maybe even filling the kiln with foam, the walls can be saved and the dome rebuilt according to Wayne's instructions. But that would take a lot of money and immediate action. Why is it even an option? Having a historic site, I mean. What does a site with charcoal kiln foundations do for us? First of all, kiln foundations are attracting visitors even where there is nothing to be seen. Just the fact that a kiln was there brings people there. And this is a history that is almost lost in the landscape. Second, this is an important site when you're thinking about air quality, energy use, and the future. Third, the masonry skill practiced by ordinary men with other jobs, evident in a kiln and dome like this, is impressive and a work of art. Charcoal making is hard, dirty, and skilled work, but the fascination of the kilns lies in their presence, I think. They're huge. They're almost like implacable. Even if we only have the site with walls or foundations, we have a way to see the kilns in the landscape. I hope I have missed some, but I know of 3 charcoal kilns standing in New England, of which 2 are built of brick. The first is this one, the Hawley Charcoal Kiln in the Hawley State Forest, a conical kiln built of stone that was vandalized in the 1980s and rebuilt by the Department of Conservation and Recreation. It was bought by them in '57, restored in '57, in the '80s, in '93, in 2011, and after vandals tore a huge hole in 13 and 14. The second kiln here is at the Catalan Ironworks State Historic Site in Maine. And it was restored in 1966. And it looks to be, that's a photo from 2021. It looks to be in need of some more work now. There are plants growing on top of it. And the third is the Leverett Kiln. And here's a picture of the restoration of the Catalan Ironworks Charcoal Kiln. And that's it.
Thank you, Pleun, for all of the amazing work you put into this.
So Anne Ferguson, you want to tell us about your grandfather?
Well, honestly, I'm not a chemist, and I really don't know much about gas masks except that they use activated charcoal, which obviously has to somehow be connected to the charcoal industry here that was being used in World War II gas masks. But I do know that my grandfather, who died in 1983, who died in 1966, I think, at the age of 83, worked for the United Gas Company as a research consultant and a chemist. And he was one of the inventors, if not the inventor. I'd have to look up to see if he was a team of the gas mask that was used in World War I. So I just thought, oh my goodness, what a connection. Who would have guessed that, you know, something that he helped invent was sort of a necessary part of this whole industry here in North Leverett, where I live historically.
That's one of those uses that, and I have no idea if those filters that we have today still use activated charcoal. Activated charcoal is used a lot in filtering. Are there any other people who want to say something or want to ask something?
I could just say that for those of us in North Leverett that have PFAS in our wells, we're using charcoal activated filters right now.
Absolutely. I am one of those people.
That's right.
Thank you. So for many years, I'm just want to follow up with what Pleun said about the preservation. For many years, I had hoped that we could somehow erect a giant roof over this kiln and still save it somehow. So I just hold on to that vision.
That I think at this time, it would take more than a roof, but a roof would be a good start. You know, it's now extremely dangerous. So even the people who would work on saving it would be in great risk. I think you'd have to put a balloon in it or something like that.
Well, I wasn't thinking of a roof for the kiln, a roof over the kiln.
I know, but
Okay.
the roof is going to fall in because the metal bands have slipped. So that the tension that is holding the bricks together is really starting to go, and the bricks themselves are crumbling a little bit. So, you know, bricks don't last forever. That's the thing. I mean, Dennis, do you know anything about doing research on bricks? I bet you do.
Yeah, there's brick societies out there, people that collect bricks and get into the whole technology of them. And I'm just going to say, as a quick follow-up on the black powder for artillery, it was used as a pre-igniter for the nitrates because it was hard to ignite the nitrates in some of these large, like shipboard artillery shells. So it was a pre-igniter that they used it for.
So from my research, what I understand is that charcoal, gunpowder made with charcoal, gunpowder in general, it is not explosive. It just burns up really quickly. So that's how it sends a bullet going. However, now we send a bullet going with an explosive, something that explodes. But that's the difference. And
Well,
so
all those poor people in Southwick and Hazardville, Connecticut that were killed when the gunpowder factories blew up would probably disagree with you. But no, it just has to do with how fast it creates gas. And it's the gas that pushes it out of out of the container. But yeah, I think part of the issue with your bricks also is you have that contained fire at a very high temperature, and bricks can only withstand those kind of temperatures for so long because they're only fired at, you may know more than I do, but it's like 1700 or 1800 degrees or something Fahrenheit. So they're not fired at a super high temperature, so they will break down relatively quickly. And places like the kilns or bake ovens in old houses, they were not made to last forever. There was an expectation that there would be maintenance to them. And obviously, as you pointed out, there just hasn't been maintenance there on your site.
And it's not being used also, right?
Right.
That's why it's hard to do the maintenance. Yeah, I think that even without maintenance, I mean, even if there's maintenance, it's still the just the wriggling of temperature change will break it apart over time because bricks are soft.
And but remember, when they're fired, it has a skin. It has a skim on it that the heating and cooling breaks down, which is what you're seeing with those lighter color bricks on the inside. Is the skin has now broken off through heating and cooling and freezing and water, and it's exposed that softer center, as you know.
Yeah, and also all those little steps in the 1/2 inches, there's like a plant on on each and every one of them. But I mean, I think the one thing that I really started to think about is that when the kiln goes, and it's gonna go, that there is still a really interesting site. Hugely interesting, like even those walls we talked about, that you know, that you would build this vast ramp, and that's a huge amount of labor putting those ramps together. You know, I mean, sure, he had bulldozers in the 1930s, but still, you know, it's still a huge amount of labor. Are there any other questions? Is there anybody from the Howard family who wants to say something? Anybody who has worked in kilns?
As we reach out to people who did work in the kiln, some of whom still live in Moore's Corner, that we'll hear more stories and learn more over the course of this next year.
Right, and we also hope to talk with members of the Howard family.
Right. Well, just one comment about the environmental issues is that we moved to North Leverett in 1973. And somewhere around that time was when the Shermans were trying to revive the charcoal business. So as they were working really hard to revive this business, there were 2 kilns. The 2 kilns are still standing. I don't know if they were using both, but they certainly were using one. And they would work really hard to fire them only when there was certain air conditions, so that the gases were not going to collect in the valley, so that the air, the breezes would carry that off. Well, they just couldn't control that. So every time that it didn't work right, all of us down here near the sawmill were dying. We couldn't sleep. Some people couldn't breathe. I mean, and there were people who lodged very, very specific complaints at that time about the kilns functioning, the kilns working, because it would be 2 or 3 days when you might not be able to sleep through the night because it was so intense. The fumes, the smell, the air quality, you were sometimes felt like you were just choking. It was, I don't know, others may want to comment on that, but boy, it was certainly memorable to me and to the Emans. They were here at the same time. We all moved in around that same time.
I was here too.
Yes, of course you were, Susan.
I was a smoker though, so I didn't mind.
and you were up the hill. You were up the hill. So the further down toward the sawmill you were, the worse it was. It just all kind of collected right here in the hollow, you know.
Well, and the other thing is, if you think how bad that was, if you imagine the 3 kilns being used continuously throughout the year in the
Right.
30s and 40s and 50s, how that would have been, and no trees, right? Leverett,
Right.
very many fewer trees. Not to mention the kiln in Prescott also going, but that's down the hill. But you know, the air quality is hugely different today. So I have two questions that that I think are really worthwhile addressing. One is Anya asks, is there any concern for burned byproducts that may be left over in the remnant piles mentioned on the maps? So charcoal itself is a really pure product.
Mhm.
And so the charcoal that's there is pure coal and is not at all hazardous. It's not like you know it's just going to break down over the years into the ground, and that's so far as I know that is not hazardous. And then Ray Bradley says, is there a government agency that takes responsibility for preserving structures like this? Well, first of all, Ray, it's a privately owned structure. And my suggestion would actually be for the owner to create it into a historic site. But no, I mean, yes and no. The Massachusetts Historical Commission, of which the Leverett Historical Commission is part, does regulate the preservation of these kinds of things and gives tools to regulate. And the Historical Commission has tools to work on regulating these things. It is, for instance, possible for the Historical Commission to create a historic site. And
It is part of the National Register Historic
Right.
District.
Right. So, but I mean, on a sort of statewide, basis. However, the Massachusetts Historical Society Commission has very little money. So when it comes to money for preservation, that is almost purely local, helped by government tools which have to do with regulation and encouragement, and then some encouragement often in terms of planning, government funding. But there is not an agency that says, oh, here, we're going to go do that. It would be nice if it was there, right? But the Historical Commission, the owner together with the Historical Commission would be the ones, if they were interested in doing that, to find a format for doing that. And those formats exist for sure. And those levers, the Historical Commission can use them. So if the owner is ever interested in doing that, then all he has to do is approach the Historical Commission, and ideas can be worked on. So,
And the Historical Commission is open to it.
but the thing that I firmly believe in is that if you put a sign out that says, hey, this is important heritage, this is that explains a little bit about the industry, that you have already done a lot of work in terms of at least making sure that the site is not a huge problem. Although the site is in and of itself a huge problem because it's very dangerous. And I can't stress enough how dangerous it is, I can't even talk anymore, how dangerous it is to even get near that wall. Because it looks like it wants to fall down. In fact, it partially has fallen down. So I really, really enjoyed working on this one. I mean, I enjoyed them all, but this one was really new to me. So I really enjoyed finding out more about it. Are there any other questions? I think it's time for us to start shutting it down. And hope everybody
Can I just say thank you so much, Pleun and Eva, for this work, because it is such an iconic presence in Leverett in all of our lives, and it was a really powerful, important industry, and I'm looking forward to what may come in the future, as we talk to people who worked in that industry and whose family was part of it. And I don't think we know yet what the outcome is going to be. So fingers crossed.
Yes, and thank you for letting me do this.